Hey solos, so you were planning a Walt Disney World trip all by yourself and you want to go to the Festival of the Arts at EPCOT. It is a celebration of all things arts, culinary arts, performing arts, visual arts, and you cannot wait to go. But there's 1 month left, so hurry up. How can you bring some of that magic of Epcot's Festival of the Arts home with you? How can some of that magic be part of your life? Well, solo spoiler, the Festival of the Arts is such an amazing inspiration for a ton of activities that you can do at home as well as in the parks. And in case you don't have a trip to Disney booked this February, doing a Festival of the Arts from a home is a great way to kind of explore your own solo magic. Hi everyone, it's Samantha. Olaf may not know who Samantha is, but now you do. And welcome to Disney Solo Magic, the #1 podcast for solo travel to Disney World. In this episode, I'm talking about the Festival of the Arts. It takes place in January and February. It's already half done, but what I really wanted to do was highlight the ways that you can be inspired by the Festival of the Arts and bring some of that inspiration into your home, into your life, and really engender some solo magic, some Disney solo magic in the month of February, inspired by the Festival of the Arts. And I can't wait to talk about it. Fun fact, I've already recorded this episode and it didn't work for me. So I'm recording it again. And I'll tell you, I was very, very excited when I recorded it the first time. And I am even more excited to talk about it the second time. Speaking of technological boondoggles, last week it has been quite a week for kind of tech issues. So long story short, long story long, Spotify. There was a problem with the feed going to Spotify. So there were 2 versions of this podcast rather than the one that the people on Spotify who listen have been waiting for new episodes since December. And we solved that problem. I moved over to Spotify for creators. And one of the great things about that is that now I can be more engaged with doing polls and seeing your comments and all of that stuff. So if you listen to this on Spotify, just like if you listen to this on YouTube, for those few of you who do that, I hope you really take advantage of being able to comment below and really tell me about what you think of the episodes, and also to answer some of the questions that I'll, pop into the episodes. Sometimes they have been rhetorical questions and now you can answer them. If you're listening on Apple, then obviously you can connect with me on Instagram, just like everyone can, obviously. But Instagram, Facebook, and Threads, all those links are below. I'm the most active on Instagram, so if you want to get in touch with me, you can send me a DM. And it's been great. It's been so wonderful to hear about all of your solo stories, to all your solo trips, and to answer your questions when you have specific questions that the podcast hasn't answered. I love answering questions. If you want to support the podcast, it is really, really wonderful when you let people know how really, really wonderful the podcast is. It's really great if you give this podcast a 5-star rating. A few people have given it a 1-star rating, and that's fine. They are entitled to that, but also maybe just don't listen. I don't know. So if you do listen and enjoy it, giving it a 5-star rating helps other people know that this is a good podcast. It's worth listening to. Also, if you write a review, that is also really, really wonderful. Subscribing is a great way to keep those numbers up, and it's just a really great way to know that you are listening, because why do a podcast if nobody's listening? The beginning of April is the 1-year anniversary for the podcast. And so again, it really will help me make those decisions when I can see that engagement growing. So please let me know that you're listening and you want more of these episodes. You can also support the podcast by buying me a coffee. Let's try to keep this podcast as ad-free as possible, except for this literal ad for myself that I'm doing right now. But if you go to buymeacoffee.com/Disney_solo_podcast, you can click Apple Pay, and for $3 American, you can quote unquote buy me a coffee and help support the podcast. And $3 American is nothing. Doesn't even get you a Joffrey's in the park. So thank you so much for all the different types of support, especially if you buy me a coffee. Not especially. It's just a different type of support, obviously, but I appreciate that additional type of support. All right, is that enough preamble? Let's get into it. All right, so Festival of the Arts is the very first EPCOT Festival of the year. It takes place in January and February, and that is followed by the Flower and Garden Festival, which begins at the beginning of March. The Festival of the Arts is the youngest or the newest of the 4 different festivals that EPCOT hosts every year. It's been around for 10 years less than 10 years. And I was going to say, when I was recording before, I said, except for the time that there was COVID. But then I remembered, no, it actually didn't get interrupted by COVID because it takes place in January and February. And the EPCOT Festival of the Arts is the very first festival I went to, and it was in February 2020. So maybe that's why it holds an extra special place in my heart, because it was my first time going in this kind of season of my life, and it got me hooked right after that. The original food festival, the Food and Wine Festival, has been going on for almost 30 years. So that really kind of compares the two. Now, I've said many times that the Food and Wine Festival is my least favorite festival because it is the OG. It doesn't need to try as hard. Whereas the Festival of the Arts, because it is the newest festival, they're constantly trying to find ways to explore this theme and to bring it to life. The reason why the festival started was because January and February have traditionally been months at Disney World that just have very, very low attendance. And probably EPCOT had even more low attendance in comparison to Magic Kingdom or Hollywood Studios. So the Festival of the Arts was a way to bring people to EPCOT in January and February. And I think it was kind of an ingenious idea to have it arts themed, because January and February in places that experience a cold gray winters often are seeing cold and gray for January and February. So to be inspired by all these different types of arts in January and February, I think is kind of an ingenious idea. Plus, in January, a lot of people have New Year's resolutions, and sometimes that involves exploring different parts of themselves or exploring different art things. And so it is a very creative way to begin the year by beginning the festival season with the Festival of the Arts. Now, a few years ago, they came up with a Figment popcorn bucket, and people lost their damn minds. I don't know if you remember this, but there were lines, 3-hour long lines to get these Figment popcorn buckets. After that, they instituted virtual queues because people were lined up all the way to the entrance to get a Figment popcorn bucket. And look, if you were one of those people that waited in line, good for you. Yay! Yay, souvenir buying. No judgment, obviously, but I don't know what that was about. And Disney did not know what that was about either. It was pretty clear that even they were kind of shocked by this Figment popcorn bucket phenomenon. And ever since then, the Festival of the Arts has really become the Figment Festival. When I was there in 2020, I did not see a lot of Figment. That was not my experience. But now it is very, very hard to go to the Festival of the Arts and not see Figment around EPCOT, but also a lot of the merchandise is all Figment themed. It's become very much the Figment Festival. And I don't really love that. I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, I just don't think it's as a creative way to kind of explore the theme. So I'm looking forward to watching how the theme kind of grows and changes as people's tastes change, because the popcorn bucket the year after was not quite as popular. And actually, that was the very first popcorn bucket I bought. So the year after the big Figment craze, there was a popcorn bucket that was it's the building that the Figment ride is in. And I just thought it was really cool that it was this building and had a rainbow inside. So now I have that on my desk, and I put some fake succulents in there so it looks like a little greenhouse. I would have put real succulents, but I have a cat who apparently loves succulents, so I can't keep succulents around. Now, like I said, the Festival of the Arts has already half over. So if you aren't planning on going this February, that's okay. You can also go next January and February, because I would bet dollars to donuts that it will happen next January or February. And also, I have a tip for you. If you are like, you know what, next year I'm definitely going to go to the Festival of the Arts. It's also a great time to go because it is so freaking cheap. In comparison, like if you compare the same week in December to the same week in January, the price difference is just astronomically different. So you can always book your hotel room now and just keep an eye on the different discounts. Every time there's a discount, call up Disney or go on the webpage where you booked and just have that discount applied. So you'll never lose a discount unless you're not proactive about it. You'll never lose a discount even if you booked when there isn't that discount. So it is a good way to actually start planning your January trip now. You can start saving, you can identify which hotel you want, book the hotel, you're just paying for the first night, and then keep an eye on the different discounts, and then just apply those discounts at any time throughout the year to your stay. So that's a way you can plan for your next year's trip to Festival of the Arts. But let's stay on this year. So just in case you're not going in the next 3 weeks, I know I'm not. I'm quite disappointed that I'm not going to Festival of the Arts this year, but I'm just like in a bit of a writing hole. I've talked about that in a few different episodes and on social media. I'm writing a book that has nothing to do with Disney, and I just gotta stay in my little writing bubble. So I'm disappointed that I am not going this year. And I was thinking about ways that I could bring some of that energy, that Festival of the Arts energy, to my February, even though I'm not going to be at Disney. And when I started thinking about it, it got me really excited because I thought, oh my gosh, I think the solos, I don't know, makes it seem like, I don't know. Anyway, I think the people listening, the solos who listen to this episode, might be really inspired by this as well. Ways to bring the Festival of the Arts home with you. Because I think with Disney, there are so many things that we find really inspiring. And when we go to Disney, we can just kind of be surrounded by them. But we can be inspired by those same things at home as well. And that's going to be a real big theme, I think, for the next few episodes, maybe even the next season of episodes, ways that we can try to pick up on this magic that we feel at Disney and bring it to our own lives. And it's not just about like watching a Disney movie because we love Disney movies. It's really being intentional about engaging in activities that help us feel the same way we feel when we go to Disney. Now, I am speaking from experience that it is very, very hard to compare the feeling of being at Disney and just living your Disney best life when you have a pile of laundry in front of you, and when you have dirty dishes in the sink, and when you have to cook for yourself, and when you don't have a giant mouse waving at you. But there are ways that you can try to tap into that, and that is really important. And I think the Festival of the Arts is a really great way to start. So let's start with the Festival of the Arts. So the Festival of the Arts is a celebration of all these different types of art. Visual art, performing arts, culinary arts, and there are things around EPCOT that help highlight these. So let's start with visual arts. One of the things that the Festival of the Arts has is a lot of different booths that feature different artists who do Disney-inspired art. So you can look up who some of these artists are, and you can follow them on Instagram, which is something that I do, and then you kind of get a parade of their art throughout the year. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. With February being Black History Month, they just put up a new blog post about celebrating soulfully, and they are highlighting particular artists as well as particular artwork that focuses on the Black diaspora and African American artists. And you can look up those artists, you can look up that artwork, and you can kind of experience what some of that artwork might tell about the Disney story in a different way than kind of standard narratives. Also really awesome. Disney also references some classical artwork in a few places around Epcot with these big 3D dioramas of like classical artwork that you probably are familiar with, even if you might not know the name and artist off the top of your head. I know I certainly couldn't I can for the Mona Lisa, the way most people can, but the other ones maybe not necessarily. And you can step into those artworks and get photos, so it's like you're in that famous painting. A couple of the examples that they talk about on the website is Luncheon at the Boating Party by Renoir, as well as Washington Crossing the Delaware. And that is a really famous painting that some of you Americans might be familiar with from your history books. The Mona Lisa is another one. So as a way to kind of tap into some of those choices that they made for the Festival of the Arts, you too can look up those artworks and you can kind of think about, what they mean, and also think about what it means for you to like literally step in them, which is what you can do during the Festival of the Arts. And you can think more broadly about that. And like, what does it mean to remix and play with art in different ways than just looking at the art in traditional ways? So, for example, the Washington Crossing the Delaware painting is very, very famous, and you probably are familiar with it, even if you have to Google it to be able to be like, oh, yeah, that's the one. There's a really cool article in Artsy Online magazine about ways that contemporary artists have used that particular painting to tell different stories about North American history. So in that article, actually, there's an artist who's Indigenous, and he is based in this land that we call Canada. A very, very famous artist, does a lot of really interesting, controversial, like boundary-pushing things. His name is Kent Monkman, and it was really cool to see him featured in that particular article. Last year, I was in Detroit, and I was only at the Detroit Institute of Arts for like 2 hours. I didn't have a lot of time. And so I asked some of the like security guards, like, what are your favorite pieces of art? Like, show me. So I got to see such cool things that I would not have seen in my 2 hours, because they were in like all these different rooms and stuff that you had to go into. And one of the art pieces that one security guard really, really wanted me to see is actually an untitled piece by Henty Wiley, who's also the artist who did the Obama portrait. I was going to say royal portrait. Nope, not the royal portrait, the presidential portrait. And it's really just a really cool, commentary about the American experience and, all of that stuff. So you can go and like do these really cool kind of explorations about these pieces of artwork that you would see at Disney, and what it'd be like to like metaphorically step into these pieces of artwork and like learn different things about them and about what they're trying to say through the artwork, which is really cool. Another thing that you could do is like go to an art gallery. Just like go to an art gallery. And if you don't have an art gallery like in your general vicinity, you can also like go on Google. They have this great like arts and culture area where you can look at so many different types of paintings and other pieces of artwork. And what's really great about seeing it on a screen versus in person, or I should say one of the benefits, is that you can really zoom in and see different textures and things like that. And I know that people don't necessarily find things like art museums or even just like looking at art the most comfortable thing. Like, it's really easy to have this narrative in your head about judgment and like all those different things. But here's the thing, artwork is not as complicated as often we like to make it seem in our head. That sounds judgmental. I don't mean it in a judgmental way at all. I just mean that, like, you know what you like. So just be really curious. If you go to an art museum, just be really curious about things that you like. And if you don't get something, or you don't understand why that's art, or you don't like something, don't overanalyze it. Don't like put all this judgment like, oh, well, obviously that's not art if I don't like it. No, just look for things you like. That's all you need to do when it comes to art. What makes you think? What makes you think just a little bit differently about the world around you? And here's the thing, if you want to go to an art gallery or explore all the different online exhibits there are online, just look for one piece that you really like and just think about why you really like them. And maybe, if you wanted to, you could also look for a second piece that corresponds with a particular Disney character. You don't need to overanalyze it. You don't need to write an essay about it, but like, oh, I really think of Cinderella. And this painting is really beautiful, and maybe it has the same colors that I associate with Cinderella. I'm going to associate this with Cinderella. Great, no problem. You pass. And then look for a third piece of artwork that maybe reminds you of something in the park. Maybe it's a ride, maybe it's a snack, maybe it's just a feeling, something that reminds you of being in the parks. And then you have those 3 little pieces of artwork, or maybe giant pieces of artwork, and use that to kind of create a mental, or maybe even like virtual through like photos and things like that, exhibit in your own Festival of the Arts that you're creating for yourself. I think that'd be really cool. Disney, I think for a lot of people, helps you feel a little bit more like yourself. And sometimes artwork can be very intimidating in our own heads. And so it's really good to find things that help you feel different and maybe more like yourself in your daily life when you're just kind of living your life. And exploring artwork could be a way to begin that. And so maybe that artwork doesn't make you feel more like yourself, but maybe it just makes you feel something different. And that different feeling is how we grow and how we learn. And that's really beautiful. And it's really, really, really easy, especially with things like social media and algorithms, to only look at things that already like fit the box in our head of things that we find comfortable. And so pushing yourself out of the boundaries to look at different things, to read different things, to listen to different things can help you learn about yourself even more. And that's what artwork can do. And that's why I think that the Festival of the Arts at EPCOT is a great way to bring some of that thinking home in this inspirational way to just kind of bring some more magic into your life. Another way that you can bring visual arts from Festival of the Arts into your daily life is to create artwork. So one of the things that they have in like the big theater in the American Pavilion is the Animation Academy. Now you can do the Animation Academy anytime of the year if you are at Animal Kingdom at Rafiki's Planet Watch, but you can do it through the Festival of the Arts in the, I don't know why I always forget the name of that theater, but anyway, the open air theater in the American Pavilion. But you can also do that at home. Find a YouTube video and learn how to draw Mickey Mouse. There's so many different really easy animation tutorials for those key characters, and that's just like what you'd be doing at the Animation Academy. So even though you might not have a turkey leg in one hand and your pencil in the other, you can still do that activity that you would at EPCOT. Another activity that you can do at EPCOT is this giant paint by numbers mural. So they have this big mural and it has all these different squares, and you go and you pick up some paint and a tiny little paintbrush, and you find the number and you paint your square, and then you've contributed to this mural. Well, you can do that at home. You can do paint by number at home. You can do color by number at home. You can do a coloring book at home. You can do any sort of paint at home. So that might be a fun thing to do at home, especially if you don't feel overly artistically inclined, that doing something like paint or color by number could be a way for you to kind of practice some of that creativity within some very constrained conditions. Another thing that I really, really love about the Festival of the Arts is that there are places around the World Showcase where they have drawn in a particular character as if the character is interacting in that space. So one thing that comes to mind is that in the China Pavilion, there's a space where it looks like Mushu has broken through the brick wall, and there's his little face and the brick and all that stuff. So one of the things that you could do is you could go for a walk in your neighborhood, or go to a different town or city and go for a walk and look for places that you could imagine a Disney character kind of bursting out from or playing around in, and just kind of keep that in mind. Maybe you photograph it, or you could sketch it or paint it if you're particularly artistic inclined. But you could kind of create that sense of Disney characters being in these spaces with you in your own, like I said, your own hometown. And if you wanted, I guess, if you were particularly inclined, you could take a picture and then also bring it to like Photoshop or Canva or even Instagram and see if you can put a character in there and then post it. And then like tag me on it so I can see. That'd be really cool. You could also just do like a walking scavenger hunt to look for colors and textures and things like that inspire you, that are particularly artistic, or that remind you of a particular character. Like go on a walk and like look for Figment colors and listen to that soundtrack over and over and over again. I mean, that doesn't necessarily sound like the most fun thing, but it could be fun for you, and you do you, bibbidi bobbidi boo. Finally, the last way that you could really appreciate the decorative arts is you could watch Disney movies with a greater eye to appreciating the artwork of the movie. I think immediately off the bat of Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty was designed as a very artistic movie. They brought in a series of different artists to really tell the story differently through different styles of art. And I know on the DVD and the Blu-ray, they actually had a documentary that they made during the 1950s when they were creating Sleeping Beauty about these different art styles and how they were being really thoughtful about it. And so I don't know if you can find that documentary now, but like watching that documentary is a really good way of exploring and being intentional about exploring artwork in Disney movies. Plus, not only do they have those classical paintings that you can step into, they've also have around EPCOT different things that highlight the art in different movies. So Sleeping Beauty is one of them. Another one is Moana. And then the third one is the penguins from Mary Poppins. And honestly, like sitting down for a weekend and watching Mary Poppins, Sleeping Beauty, and Moana and like appreciating the artwork kind of sounds like a dream weekend for me. Yeah, like it's not EPCOT, but I don't know, this sounds pretty awesome. So you can also like watch different movies, of course, and you can really think about, again, the intentionality of certain artwork styles, like the type of story that Tarzan tells in comparison to Aladdin, for example, because of the distinct artwork style that they used for Tarzan. You could also watch Snow White and like marvel at the achievement that was Snow White. Like everything was hand-drawn, and I used to think of it as a very slow movie, but I rewatched it again a couple years ago, and I was just in awe of just how amazing it was that multiple people hand drew that, conceptualized all those different characters. It's really, really fascinating. Fantasia, the original Fantasia, and then Fantasia 2000. Those are artistic masterpieces that blend the music and the art together, different styles of art, different styles of classical music. And the original Fantasia, the Walt Disney wanted movie theaters to like install different equipment and like do things like spray people with water when there was water. Like he basically wanted Muppets 3D. R.I.P. They basically wanted Muppets 3D in people's local theaters, and like local theater owners are like, no, we are not hiring anyone to walk around and spray people with water. Sorry, not sorry. So you can think about all those different elements that really bring art alive, and that, frankly, this is a little snarky, that, frankly, is much more of a tribute to the Festival of the Arts than Figment is. Ooh, sorry, not sorry. All right, another type of art that the Festival of the Arts really highlights is performing arts. So all 4 festivals have a concert series in the evening. For the Flower and Garden Festival and the Food and Wine Festival, they have somewhat contemporary pop and rock and R&B bands. For the International Festival of the Holidays that takes place in December, they have the Candlelight Processional, which is the telling of the Christmas story. For the Festival of the Arts, they have Broadway performers, and many Broadway performers from the original cast of a particular Broadway show, like a Disney Broadway show. And it's really, really amazing to see these performers in real life. Now, they are singing Broadway songs from Disney Broadway musicals, but they aren't necessarily just singing those songs, and they certainly aren't putting on a Broadway caliber performance. So you can get some of that Broadway feel in a couple ways. But before I go into those couple ways, I want to highlight one other thing that's happening this year at the Festival of the Arts related to Broadway, and that is an exhibit they have in Communicore Hall with different costumes from different Disney Broadway musicals. Now, there's a few things I can get snarky about and relate to Disney, and Communicore Hall and the surrounding area is one of them. I'm not going to do a big rant about that. That'll just be a bonus episode one day. I'm not going to do a big rant about it, but I will say that it seems really cool for this particular festival that they have transformed the space into an exhibit space. And I'm kind of sad that I'm going to miss that because I really am interested to see how they take such a bland, inspiring space and do something cool with it. Anyway. So here's the thing. If you aren't going to the Festival of the Arts in the next 3 weeks and you're worried that you're going to miss the Broadway caliber performances and seeing the costumes, that is a very real kind of FOMO type of feeling. But you can still get some of that if you go to Disney at any time throughout the year. So for example, the Beauty and the Beast show at Hollywood Studios is a fantastic stage show. It is kind of Broadway caliber, even though it's much, much shorter, and it opened around the same time the Beauty and the Beast did, and at the same time that they did the Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. So it was all kind of created together in that same spirit, and that's a really kind of cool way to see some sort of stage show on a much smaller scale, of course, but with an actual plot. Whereas if you see the Broadway performers at the Festival of the Arts, they're amazing, the songs are great, but there's no plot. They're showing their singing capabilities. They're not showing the plot of a particular show. So you can see Beauty and the Beast instead. If you're sad about the costumes, missing the costumes, which frankly I am, there's actually 2 hidden places to see costumes at Disney that most people don't even know about. So the first is in EPCOT. If you go to the France Pavilion, there is the sing-along theater. In the sing-along theater, there's like a Beauty and the Beast sing-along. They have a lobby of this theater where people stand before you go in. In that lobby are displays of costumes from Broadway, from opera, and from live action movies. So the last time I was there, there was a Cinderella costume from the live action movie of Cinderella. There was a Maleficent costume from the live action Maleficent movie. There were Broadway costumes. I can't remember which show. And it was amazing. You don't need to go in to see the sing-along or whatever. You can just kind of stay in the lobby if you want. And you can just say to the ushers, like, oh, I'm just here for the costumes. And they'll be like, okay. Okay. They don't care. They don't care at all. So the exhibit space in Communicore Hall might actually feel quite busy, and you might actually feel kind of pressured to move along and jockey for spots. But these costumes that are in the France Pavilion all the time, you can take as much time as you want. Now, I think there's only 3 or 4. It's not like there's a ton, but quality over quantity, you know what I mean? Also, if you go to Hollywood Studios and you go to Walt Disney Presents, that is an exhibit. It's an exhibit space that's to like the right of Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. It is an exhibit about the history of Walt Disney and the Walt Disney Studios. All the way at the back, at the end of the exhibit, they often have a display of different costumes from live action movies. So I've seen live action costumes from Haunted Mansion, from Little Mermaid, costumes and props. It was so cool. And I'm like, nobody's back here. Plus, you can meet the live action Ariel, which is cool. And there's a movie theater that sometimes plays like early runs of Disney and Pixar movies before they're released in the theaters. So that's something so great to do solo because nobody is rushing you to move on. You can just go and like look at these costumes, and it's really cool. So if you're missing the costumes this year at Festival of the Arts, you can still see costumes any time of the year at Disney in those 2 places. But the other way to really appreciate the performing arts from the comfort of your own home is to listen to Disney Broadway soundtracks, to be able to listen to the whole album. Now, I know sometimes people don't like to listen to Broadway shows unless they've seen them in person first, but you have seen them in person first. You've seen Beauty and the Beast. You don't need to see the stage show to listen to the soundtrack. So listen to the different soundtracks from the Broadway shows. Compare and contrast in your brain the different sounds of how they're telling the stories from the movies versus the stage shows. There's also a couple different Disney Broadway shows on Disney Plus. Newsies comes to mind really quickly. Hamilton is not a Disney show, obviously, but that is on Disney Plus, and it was produced by Disney. And I've seen a lot of recorded Broadway shows, and I would say hands down, the filming of Hamilton is the best filming of a stage show I have ever seen. So if you haven't seen that yet, I would definitely recommend watching it. I was listening to the soundtrack just the other day and I was like, oh my God, I need to watch the musical again. It's just so amazing. So you can watch that as a Broadway show. There's also a couple live action sing-alongs and things like that they've done at the Hollywood Bowl. The Encanto one comes to mind. I think they were going to publish the Lion King one, but it got such bad publicity that it must have just been shelved. But there are definitely things in our technologically enhanced world for us to be able to see some of these Broadway caliber performances from the comfort of our own home. So find one, watch it, and enjoy it. And one last thing, the other type of art that they like to celebrate during the EPCOT Festival of the Arts is the culinary arts. They really like to highlight different types of fun foods. And of course, like all of the food festivals, there is a variety of different food booths throughout the park, but the theme of all of these different foods is something artistic. So sometimes it's just kind of an interesting blend of flavors. Other times it is an interesting display on the plate. Sometimes it's an interesting way of preparing it, like a deconstruction. Sometimes it's just like bright, bold colors. But there's so many ways that they have interpreted this artistic approach to foods. So guess what, Solos? If you are doing this food festival at home, artistic food it up. Maybe create a meal that is the most colorful meal you have ever made. Like try to just make those colors pop. Alternatively, try to make a meal that's all one color. Maybe not brown. Like try to push yourself to like a fun, bright color just to kind of see what you can do when you're thinking about the art of the way the food looks. Maybe you go grocery shopping and just think to yourself, I'm going to get the most beautiful piece of meat or the most beautiful vegetables I've ever seen and cook with those. Like I said, they sometimes do deconstructed dishes. So maybe you want to cook something where the display, like the way it's presented on the plate is totally different because it is more deconstructed. The other thing you can do is you can look up the menus or watch a video about like the best foods at the food festival and try to recreate some of those things at home. So I know a lot of people have been talking about a beef Wellington that has been very popular this year. Well, I know that Gordon Ramsay like yells about how difficult a beef Wellington is, but I used to make one all the time, like individual pieces. They were basically like small pieces of steak, and then I did pesto on top or like maybe a mushroom blend. You can also do a pate, which is more traditional, and then I wrap it in Pillsbury crescent dough, and that's how I cook it. I've never had, I guess, a Gordon Ramsay beef Wellington, but I don't know. I enjoyed that pretty well. Another thing that I've seen this year that's really popular is a caprese poutine, which, to be honest, doesn't sound very good. But anyway, you can do French fries, then you can do pesto, then you can do like mozzarella or bocconcini, and then tomatoes on top. I would like fire roast them or grill them or like broil them to get them a little soggy. I mean, okay, how could that be bad? But it also sounds kind of weird. Maybe you want to do something simple like bake chocolate chip cookies, but just use like M&Ms so that there's some color in it. One thing that I was thinking of doing was to like make one of those popcorn blends like they have at the Main Street Confectionery at Magic Kingdom. And they're like these expensive popcorn blends, but it's really just melted chocolate and candy on popcorn. So I was thinking of like going to my local bulk store, getting some different colored chocolate, and then just making this really colorful type of popcorn. And I'm like thinking through it now. I could eat it while doing my like Mary Poppins, Sleeping Beauty, Moana movie marathon. Again, that sounds like the most amazing thing ever. And then when I'm like hopping on the sugar high of this candy, of this candied popcorn that I just made, I could go through like the Google like art repository and find a portrait that reminds me of Sleeping Beauty. Again, sounds like a fun weekend, you know what I mean? So I hope that this episode has inspired you to think of how you can celebrate the Festival of the Arts at home in the month of February. Because again, if you want Disney magic to be part of your life as often as possible, if you want that feeling that you get at Disney World to be in your life more than just at Disney World, then you need to be intentional about it. And the way that you are intentional about it helps conjure that magic. And like, look, I know I have people in my family too that don't really understand the whole Disney thing. And so I have to kind of hide some of that from a lot of them. And that's okay. I don't mind like hiding it. What I'm really doing is just keeping it to myself because I want to protect something that I think is so important and so valuable to me. But I also have so many different opportunities to be connected with that Disney magic by listening to something, by creating this podcast, by following particular accounts on Instagram, but also being intentional about thinking, what is it about Disney that I feel so connected to? And how can I bring more of that into my daily life? And so I don't need to have a conversation with the closest people in my life about how I'm thinking about Disney. Instead, I'm just showing up as maybe with a little bit more magic because of the ways that I've been intentional about conjuring this magic that I get from Disney. And finding spaces and places and opportunities to do that is integral for you to keep that solo magic going. And I think the Festival of the Arts is a really great way to start that for 2025. I already know that I'm going to have some more suggestions like this in February because I'm going to talk about like solo dates because I like a good theme and it's Valentine's Day, etc., etc. So it might be something that you want to start thinking about for 2025. Maybe you want to capture a particular kind of Disney solo magic at home journey that is complemented by your trip or your trips rather than holding on to just that 1 week or those few days that you're going to be there. But how can you, again, be intentional about marking and reflecting on this Disney magic in other parts of your life? So oh gosh, I can't wait actually. I'm super excited to do my own little Festival of the Arts at home. And so please let me know how you are going to bring the Festival of the Arts to your home in February. Even if we aren't walking through EPCOT, which again, like you can go walk 20,000 steps in your normal life if you want, if you really want the full EPCOT experience. Even though we might not all be at EPCOT to celebrate the Festival of the Arts, this festival is really about creativity and beauty and joy and finding that artistic element in things we might not always expect, like food, for example. So we can do that wherever we are. And that's really what I'm trying to get with this podcast. Please share with me how you are going to bring some of your solo magic inspired by Epcot's Festival of the Arts to your life this February. I cannot wait to hear about it. Let's create our own virtual Festival of the Arts and as much figment as we want, which in my case will be not too much. All right, everyone, until next week. Bye. Hey Solos, it's Samantha. I hope you liked this episode and all the episodes of Disney Solo Magic, the #1 and I think only podcast for solo travel to Disney World. Help me make this podcast even bigger. Please make sure you rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and on YouTube. You can do all three. That's really great. It's also really, really great to connect with you, and you can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Instagram is the best way to get in touch with me. And if you want to support the podcast even more and keep it ad-free, you can buy me a coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Disney_solo_magic. And for the low price of $3 American, which is about $5 Canadian, and it's hard to even find a coffee at that price these days, you can support me and the podcast and help keep me caffeinated for a week ahead of content creation and editing. Thank you all so much for listening. It is just wonderful to build this community, and I can't wait to create more content for you. Bye.